Hello and welcome to episode number 343 of the Plane Talking UK podcast. I'm Carlos, and in this week's show, an Avro RJ85 lands at Norwich Airport, but not under its own power. Duty free is set to change, and drones are being flown into active volcanoes on purpose. And in the military this week, SEAL Team 6 sees some serious action, and the Blue Angels Legacy Hornets are going to conduct the final Pensacola flyover. Joining me this week, as always, in the PTUK Master Suite studio, it is, of course, the man who has all the beers. It's Matt Smith.
All the beers? What are you trying to say? How rude. You make me sound like an alcoholic.
Not at all. Not at all. They'll last you ages.
Yes, I resemble that remark. Anyway, yes. Hello. How is everyone? Sorry, a little bit sort of panic trying to get started there. We couldn't get online for some reason for a minute, but I think we're there now. All good. I
think what it was, Matt, is when you put that picture of Jonathan Warner up on the green screen, that's what affected everything.
I don't know what you mean. I don't know what you mean. What you mean this picture here? Let me just do this. It's all right. Well, you see, I should just very briefly explain the reason why we said that. Jonathan Warner usually supplies me with a picture that goes up on the green screen, like what you can see behind me right now. Apologies if you're listening to the audio version. This makes no sense. He sent me the message saying, would you like a picture of an egg beater to have as your background this evening? And if I move slightly to my right, this is what I got.
Oh, hideous.
I know. Anyway, I don't think I can leave that there any longer. I'm going to make that go away.
No.
There we go. Slightly scared.
So,
but, yes.
He's back with us again this week. It's lovely to see you back. Nev, you are back with us again, and we've had a very good week this week, haven't we?
It's been very hectic, yes. I was in Gibraltar for a couple of days over the weekend, which was lovely, but of course, obviously we can't go there again now because of all the changes that have gone on. And then on Tuesday, I was filming with the fellows from the A320 podcast, which was a full day in the A320 sim up at Cambridge Airport. And then Carlos and I were at Duxford, which was superb, actually, and the weather was fantastic, wasn't it? Well, we did a superb interview with the CEO of Farran, and when I've edited it this week, hopefully we'll be playing it out, or the first part of it, actually, on next week's show, because I think it's going to be a 4-part series, so I'm really looking forward to doing that.
Yeah, we had a good day Wednesday. Good weather. I'm looking forward to that coming on the show as well, Nev.
Yeah.
Really much. So he's back this week. I'm very, very happy indeed to say that he's back this week on the show. And it is a hugely warm welcome to Armando. Welcome back on this week.
Hey, thanks, guys. I had to kick Steph out of this seat and get her out of here and back to her own show. But yeah, I'm happy to be back as usual. And not a lot of flying, not a lot going on with me. Actually, just been to the doctors the last 2 weeks. So just been laying around drinking a bunch of soup and having my family take care of me and cuddling with dogs. No flying whatsoever this week.
No flying at all. That must,
I know.
That must
it's like
hit
an
hard.
albatross. Like a bird with its wings clipped. Like a wounded pigeon in New York City. Wow, that's really vivid. Anyways,
it's good to see. It's good to see you, even if you are feeling a little bit worse for weather at the minute. But no, it's good to have you back on, Armando. And you've got some military news coming up as well later for us, haven't you? As well.
As long as you guys will still take it, I do have some military stories.
Yeah.
But more importantly, I've just learned the word fangirling. I'm totally fangirling because we have a great guest on.
Who have we got on this week, Armando? Come on, you do the introduction for this.
Okay, so I'll do the introduction. This is a young man, Ryan, who I've actually followed on YouTube for quite a bit. I love the videos. So he's out in Papua New Guinea flying some missionary for a missionary organization, flying a fantastic Kodiak with, I think it's a G1000, right, Ryan?
Yeah, that's correct. Thanks so much for having me on.
Yeah, fantastic videos, my friend. I can't wait to ask you. I could probably spend all 2 hours doing this, but I'll try to limit it to something because I literally just love watching your videos, and some of those airstrips are just so cool for any pilot. And what a dream to be flying in those locations and getting that experience.
Well, thanks. Yeah, great to hear it. Yeah, it is a lot of fun for sure.
So round up this week, and it's obviously the stuff that we've got for the interviews that we've done are going to be coming out next week, so make sure you keep your eyes open on those. Big thanks to everyone also who's joined us in the live YouTube chat room this evening, all the usual family members in the chat room this evening. Just going to go through a quick rundown of who we've got in there. Stephen H, Alan White, hello. Lane Street, Dave Abbey's in there, Captain Cruz, Andrew Vendersag, Dave Abbey, Rakon is also in the chat room. Just scrolling up, our main man Micah is in there. Masha, hello to you, Masha. Just scroll up, make sure I don't make Jack English. Hello to you, Jack. Richard Adam Sturman. Hello to you, Gareth. I hope you're all right. Aaron P. Hello to you, Aaron. And a big hello to everyone who has joined us on the live show tonight. Don't forget as well, if you do listen to the audio podcast, don't forget to follow us on YouTube and check out when we go on the live stream on YouTube. You can hit the subscribe button on our YouTube page, and also if you're there, hit the bell icon next to the subscribe button to be notified when we go live and we are recording episodes like we are now. Then you can join us in the YouTube chat room. So moving on to the next part of the show, then we've got a few bits of housework to do, and obviously it is the beginning of the month, and it is the time where we get to say a big thanks to everyone who donates to the show via Patreon and PayPal. So Nev, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Carlos. Well, this is a very important part of the show. This is the bit where we say thank you to all of our Patreon and PayPal donators. And this month it was Nicholas Codling, Warren Dixon, Luis Chares, Alan Loveday, Andrew van der Sarg, Alan White, Stephen Howland, Tanya Wyman, Megan Carrion, Jacob Darlington-Brown, Nicholas Hewitt, Masha, Owen, Ruben Wells, Nico Rega, Graham Haley, Jonathan Warner, Eric Graves, Matt Caton, Jordan Rose, Andrew Wilson, Captain Jeff, Apping, Liz Piper, Jeff Ward, Myla, Evan Shue, Philip Labe and Stuart Backer. And thanks very much indeed to Jenny and Masuz Karim for their PayPal donations. And this is really important for us to be able to keep the show on air. So thank you very much to one and all of you.
Yep, a big thanks, because it all helps to push the show and push things along. So yeah, big thanks to everyone who has donated to us. So we're going to move on with our chat with Ryan then, our guest on the show this week. And for those of you who haven't seen Ryan's channel on YouTube, it's one to definitely check out. Honestly, Ryan, your videos are fantastic. I think one of the big things that attracted me to your videos, not just because of the quality, but also because not only do you do the videos of you flying into various locations within Papua New Guinea, but you also provide a really instructional video as to exactly the runnings of the aircraft. So, you know, hats off to you.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate that.
So, Ryan, how did this all start for you then? Where was the first kind of flight for you? Was it PPLs, Cessna 150s, Pipers?
Yeah, it started, at least the interest started probably like first grade, I would say. I lived actually here in Papua New Guinea when I was a kid. My parents were missionaries, and we lived on the exact same base when I was in first grade through about fifth grade. And I had the opportunity to go on some flights out to some of the bush locations that I actually fly to now for Christmas to visit friends and whatnot. And even at first grade, I was like, wow, this would be the coolest job ever. And it just stuck with me, and like many from an early age. So right out of high school is when I actually started pursuing aviation. And so I think 19 was when I got my pilot certificate. Yeah, from there, I actually took a long break from flying after that and didn't pick it back up until I was 26. So yeah, I did it backwards than most people do.
So you fly, obviously the videos you fly show us flying into all those locations in Papua New Guinea. How did that kind of job or that kind of role come into your life? Was it a kind of an application and you just thought, I'd love to do something like this, and that was you're in?
No, I wish it was that easy. It was actually an interest going into missions more so than aviation. Like, I knew I wanted to come into missions, and specifically this one because I work with Ethnos 360 Aviation, and like our main focus is to assist the tribal church planters that are living out here, and that's something I want to be a part of. And originally, I actually wanted to be a church planter. So it's kind of backwards, but that's why I went into missions originally and then came into aviation. And it worked out well that I could still be a part of missions through aviation. So yeah, I had to go through all of their training to become a missionary before I could actually even do the actual flying mission part of it as well.
So your Missionary Bush Pilot YouTube page, you've obviously got quite a lot of videos on there now. You've got a lot of subscribers as well. So there's obviously a lot of love for the videos. How did that all come about? Because obviously you've got is it 3 or 4 or 5 cameras you've got on the aircraft? You've got in the actual aircraft itself and on the outside of the aircraft. Was that kind of an idea one day? You just thought, I'm going to do a YouTube, vlog, and
been mulling it around like for 2 years now, but to be honest, I was like, man, no one's gonna watch these videos. YouTube is so hard to like get any views into like worthwhile for your time. But I don't know. I've always wanted to do YouTube. I thought it'd be a lot of fun, and just said, oh, you know what? I'm just gonna like try it. 1,000 subscribers in a year. We'll see how that goes. And within like a month and a half, I had that. So I was like, all right, well, maybe people are actually interested in seeing this kind of stuff, and just kind of went on from there.
Armando, over to you.
Okay, Ryan, we have not prepared you for this. So, well, I am a professional pilot. I was 21 years in the Air Force. So I am very, very interested. And in this podcast, we don't usually get very technical. However, we do have a lot of people that understand aviation. Actually, most of our listeners probably know more about aviation and flying than I do. But I'm so glad to have an opportunity to talk to you because I've got so many questions. And first of all, don't diminish your channel. It's got 111,000 subscribers. So I don't know if we mentioned that or not. That's a lot of subscribers. So first of all, I suppose I'm going to start with a compliment, which is at every single flight that you film, you're very thorough and you do the checklist and you, I feel, have a great routine to fight complacency, which is probably one of those things, especially when you're doing that many, 5-6 legs a day that are 10 minutes long. I'm really, really impressed with your professionalism. Is that something that you strive to keep?
Well, thank you. I do very much strive to keep that because I know my own hazardous attitudes and its resignation. So it's kind of like, I know myself, it doesn't really matter. Let's just hurry up and get going because nothing's going to happen anyways. So I know that about myself, so that I really have to slow myself down. And even if I'm not filming a video, I'm always saying, right, slow down. So I actually appreciate doing the videos because it forces me to slow down and like talk through everything rather than just like, because a lot of times you'll have weather coming in really quick and you're just like, we've got to go. Like you're either getting in the plane now or you're going to stay here. So it helps me slow down to stay safe because complacency kills.
Yeah, and I know when we're doing interviews with aviators, usually before the show we'll preview them. It's like, hey, don't say anything on the show that you wouldn't say to the FAA or that you don't want recorded forever in history. But you're doing that every day. So does that add an extra level of sort of oversight when you have the cameras and you have the audio being recorded?
Yeah, it definitely, I've actually had to go back and we have CASA rules here rather than the FAA. And I've had to go back and look at them and be like, okay, I want to be legit here. I don't want to do anything that's like, that I have called. So what are the exact regulations for such and such and such and such so that I don't make a fool of myself and we don't get phone calls saying, hey, you're not supposed to be doing that. Here's a fine. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's probably a good fear of anybody that records and posts their videos publicly is somebody with a badge saying, we got to talk.
Yeah.
So one of my other questions, I'm going to jump around a little bit. So one of my questions is whenever you're flying, I hear you making SAR calls or kind of calls in the blind. I can't imagine that there's a lot of radio stations out there. How does that work who are you talking to when you're making those calls?
Yeah, so SAR is just search and rescue, and it's just like flight following in the States or maybe in a different country. So basically, we have to file flight plans now for every single one of our flights, and we have to be in contact with them Some of it is so that they have record of where we're going, so that they can charge us for all the different landings and whatnot. But yeah, so I cancel my SAR sometimes early before I'm even on the ground, and people are like, why are you doing that? Well, usually it's because there's people on the ground that would response team. If I did have an accident within the pattern, they could get contact out way faster than SAR Watch could come and help me out. We also have a V2 tracker on our airplane, so our home base can follow me around, and if they would be immediately notified all the way back to the States. So I'm not worried about that in that respect. So, but yeah, it's hard to get a hold of them some days, and that's another reason why I cancel a lot of times early, is because we're talking on HF radios, which is, so we have VHF and HF. So if we can't get them on the VHF, then we have to switch over to HF, and that's just usually terrible and frustrating, and for everybody, them and us alike, for sure.
That's awesome. That actually, I wouldn't have thought that you guys are talking on HF radio, but I guess it probably makes sense with the terrain out there, huh? Like you got to get over the hills. So so you fly it's a Quest Kodiak, right?
That's correct. It's the first version. So since then they switched over to Dayher or whatever, and that's now version 2. Yeah.
So we've got a good friend of the show. She was on the show last week, actually, who flies a Kodiak for skydiving operation. But for those people that are not familiar with the Kodiak, tell me 3 things that you would like them to know about the Kodiak, good or bad.
Well, it has better avionics than some of the commercially flown airplanes here in Papua New Guinea, which is nice for IFR flying. But it can empty, it can land and stop within 500 feet, and full up, heavy, all the way up to 72.55 pounds. It still can take off usually in around 1,000 foot on a grass runway or paved runway.
So that's one of the videos that first led me to your channel. Well, you have one that's called a 1,600 foot wet mountain strip or something like that. Yeah. I don't know when you filmed that, but I was trying to improve my own flying, because I fly out of what I thought was a short airstrip, like 2,500 feet in grass, until I saw your channel. But I think that was one of the things that I was looking for, and that's how I found you And I was like, oh my gosh. So how do you approach those airports? I mean, 1,600 feet, 2,000 feet. What are you thinking about? How are you planning that out as you're approaching the airport?
Well, we always have committal points, and I always try to call them out so that once you get to this specific spot, you're now too close to the mountains to safely go around. People are always like, oh, it looks like you have lots of room to go around. Well, the camera perspective and a much wider perspective, but from that point, you're not going to be able to safely go around, and depending on your weight of the aircraft too, how much fuel, how much cargo you have on. So from that point on, no matter what, a kid runs out, a pig runs out, I'm going to be landing on the runway no matter what. And but no, we do a string approach. So basically, it's something. It's not really any different than any other kind of approach, but we're trying to keep a constant vertical speed coming all the way in. And I'm basically just staring at my touchdown spot, or not really my touchdown spot, but right before it. So if I were to rotate the plane, I want to be about a plane and a half distance back is where my aiming point is, so that I touch down exactly where I want to touch down. And I just keep that exact same spot just fixated right on my cowling, right where I want it. And then I'll just adjust my power to keep my altitude coming in directly where I want to. So, yeah.
Have you ever thought, I guess we'll get to your ultimate goals in a little bit, but have you ever thought about coming back to the US or being out there and teaching bush flying or these kinds of techniques?
Not really. It hasn't really occurred to me that much. Like instructing in the States at a 141 school, but it was at a 141 school for like rich foreign kids to come over. And it just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth thing, you know? So like for me, like I was the type that I bought all my own books. I read all my own books. I took all of my IFR courses myself. I didn't even go to bought some videos, studied, did it. And so then to have rich kids be like, here, spoon feed me, like every little, what page should I read? And I was just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So I kind of left the bad taste for instructing, but I don't know. We'll see what the future holds, but I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I'm going to ask you the follow-up question first, which is, what was your most rewarding flight? But I'll ask first, what has been your most harrowing experience out there so far?
Harrowing, as in,
kind of a scary teeth breather moment where you're just like, oh boy, this is.
Thankfully, I haven't had too many. I would say probably dealing with weather, it would probably be top 5 for sure. I had just got instant rating many years ago back in the States, but then never really used it like most people do. Like they just, unless they're going commercially, they're just like, oh, they might fly through a cloud here or there. But when I got to the field, like I had 0 real experience. And then I got my IFR rating here, and the IFR flying here is much different than Oklahoma, which is where I did most of my training. So we have tropical storms that come up very fast, and some of them are fairly violent when you fly through them. So my first year was just testing my own comfortability level, I should say, in what I feel comfortable flying with. If I feel comfortable flying with passengers through certain things, or if I'm by myself, what do I feel comfortable? So I think the first year of having that, a good eye-opener of like, here's what for you, and here's how it can stress and raise your blood pressure. So yeah, I've flown through a couple of storms my first year that had some pretty severe turbulence, and after flying through it, I was like, if the passengers get off the plane and say, I thought I was going to die today, that's an indication that you shouldn't have done that flight. So
I think that would apply. I think that would apply whether you're like a captain at American Airlines or flying out there in PNG. But so the natural follow-up is what has been your most rewarding flight?
I would say medevacs. I really enjoy flying medevacs. We fly them for the missionaries. We also fly them for just the PNG citizens. And I enjoy that because you feel like directly like, oh, I really helped that person. Like if I wouldn't have flown them, they would have died, kind of thing. So that's a service that we do here. We fly down to Australia. We also will just fly the PNG people out here to the hospital and stuff. So it's great that we have the ability to actually fly all the way down to Australia, because was it 2 years ago, almost to the month, I had an infection, just a scratch on my leg. It was a scratch. It wasn't even a cut. And it went septic into my kneecap and had to be flown down to Australia, have surgery on my knee, and I still have like internal damage from it. So it's a really nice thing that we had. And that was in like 2 days kind of thing. So it's really cool that we have the ability to fly down to Australia to get some proper medical care if need be when COVID isn't around.
Right. That's the first one. So everybody drink.
Oh,
yeah.
Quick, grab a drink, everyone.
So that's a great segue. So we talked about medevac. For those that are interested, because missionary flying is one of those, I guess, kind of little known, mysterious. What is it exactly that people see ads somewhere, or they'll go to an aviation event like Oshkosh, and they'll usually be a recruiting booth of sorts. But so in addition to medevac, what is your day-to-day flying? What is missionary flying?
Specific our mission organization, we would fly, I would say probably 95% of our flights or more are directly for missionaries that live, and more specifically, they live out in the bush. Like what I mean by bush is they live out in the jungles and they live out there full time. So we fly for, there's kids, we fly them out to school sometimes. We fly all their supplies, like their food. If they have any building projects that are going on, we fly for those. So basically, our whole job is just to assist them so that they can live out their full time, translating Bible, teaching the people how to read. They actually come up with, there's 800 languages in Papua New Guinea, and they actually break the languages down, come up with an alphabet, teach these people how to read and write their own language. So yeah, it's a huge, long process, but our job is to help them get their job done quicker.
Man, that's awesome. You know, and I asked about one rewarding flight, but that's gotta feel good when you know that every single flight that you're going to take off and land, you're actually having a great purpose for it. But listen, I could sit. I hope to see you at Oshkosh next year in that the influencer tent, because you know we've had a lot of friends of the show that go out there and they'll do their talks. But I'm really hoping to meet you in person at one of these aviation events. And I could go on all day long, but I think Nev has some questions from the chat room.
I thought you were never going to stop.
I don't want to, but producer John is sitting there glaring at me in the screen. So,
Well, so Ryan, Richard Adams in the chat room asks, how often do you get stuck at a strip due to weather? He says he knows that flying is done before the afternoon storms if possible, but is the weather relatively predictable in PNG?
I have never been stuck overnight or anything like that, maybe for an hour or so waiting for some clouds to move on. But thankfully, I have never had to spend the night. But if I had to, a lot of times we have, and we also, if worst case scenario, there's always people out there that would be more than willing to put you up for a night in their bush house. You might just not get great sleep on the ground or on a mat. Yeah, I would say the weather is definitely not very predictable, and it changes very, very quickly.
Yeah. Richard also asks, have you ever had any uncontrollable passengers, as he guesses that many will be first-time flyers or very low times at least, and given the weather and turbulence, that might be quite scary for them?
No. I would say the culture here, if they're not that outspoken. So if they were very, very nervous, which usually they are, typically they'll just of them and close their eyes for the ride. So haven't had anybody that I've needed to go back and land for.
That's good. And then he says some of the strips seem to get fairly overgrown before they get mown or slashed. How often do you have to refuse flights pending clearance, and how long does it take before it gets sorted?
That's like the story of my. It seems that every time they'll have issues with getting grass. Typically, if we just say, yeah, we're closing it, then within a week or so, they're going to recut it so that they can get it opened up just for themselves, so they can fly their coffee out and whatnot. But yeah, it's hard because the provincial governments are the ones that usually pay them to upkeep the maintenance for the airstrips. And maybe they just they aren't getting paid enough, I don't know, but the lack of motivation it takes potentially a week or two to cut the airstrip, and then by the time they're done, they have to start off on the next end again. So I can understand their lack of motivation to do such a huge job. But yeah, it's a constant battle to have nicely maintained airstrips.
I'm sure. And final question from Alan White in the chat room. Has Ryan learned to be an on-the-road maintenance technician, fixing the little niggles as they crop up with the aircraft?
Own maintenance staff. I am a licensed A&P back in the States and actually worked as a mechanic for 3 years. But we have our own staff of mechanics here, and they do a great job at keeping our planes in tip-top shape, so I don't have to.
Actually, I'm just going to ask you, Ryan, how do your family feel about your flying? Because obviously you do fly in some really quite kind of, I wouldn't say dangerous, but quite challenging areas. I mean, do they mind the job you do?
Not at all. Thankfully, I'm married to a woman that encourages my fun, adventurous things like such. And on the weekends, if I need to go for a motorcycle ride, she's quick to let me know that I should go for a motorcycle ride.
Oh dear. Right. Well, no, I was going to say, Armando, we've got about 2 minutes. So here is your opportunity for 3 minutes for a couple more questions. Go on, fire
Don't
away.
forget the last one as well. Don't forget the last question.
Oh, that's right. So I'll ask one quick question, which is where, if you figured out, and it's perfectly fine not to, but where do you see yourself going from here, either on the missionary path or on the aviation path?
Yeah, so next January, not this one, but next in January 22 to the States and start helicopter training. we're transitioning to a lot of 3 helicopters in the next year to year and a half, and we need more helicopter pilots. So rather than getting brand new pilots that are helicopters, we figured it's going to be a lot quicker transition if we just send all of our fixed wing pilots back to get dual rated. So I'll start that, and then I'll be flying the R66 probably for the first year, and then I'll be transitioning back and forth between the Kodiak and the R66. I plan to do this tentatively right now until my kids are out of high school, so about another 9 years, and then after that, man, I don't really know I don't have any plans specifically in aviation on what I want to do, and at that point, I'm tired of doing what I do, so we'll see.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to mark the calendar 9 years from now to get somebody that has bush flying experience, is dual rated rotary wing and fixed wing, has an AMP, and is a flight instructor. I'll come back and find you. Ryan, so before I ask you the last question, I do want to plug your YouTube. It's NTMA Pilot, right?
If people just search for just Missionary Bush Pilot, they'll find it. Yeah, I think that's the official name, like in all the metadata. But if you just search for Missionary Bush Pilot, then it'll come right up.
Okay, perfect. Which is also your Instagram and your Facebook, Missionary Bush Pilot, right?
Try to keep it simple.
I like it. We're simple people here at PTUK.
That's right.
So our last question that we always ask is, if money was no object and you could fly any aircraft in the world, past, present, or future, what aircraft would that be?
Probably like an open cockpit Stearman, like slow, low, just the wind going through your hair. That just sounds amazing to me. Yeah.
Awesome. We'll be in touch because we do have access to one.
All right. Sounds great.
Yeah, we have access to one with Bob Mills, actually. He's one of our good friends and a friend of the show, and he just bought a Stearman, so we'll see what we can make happen.
Oh, I think that should happen.
That'd be awesome.
Absolutely.
Maybe someday.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we're going to say a big thanks to you, Ryan, for coming on the show today. It's been an absolutely pleasure to talk to you. We know it's really early where you are as well. The time difference is quite big for where you are. But no, for anyone, don't forget, check out Missionary Bush Pilot on YouTube. The videos are absolutely stunning. And Ryan, just carry on putting those videos out because you've got a lot of fans out there for sure.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate you having me on.
So we're going to say a big thanks and from everyone in the chat room and all the guests and hosts. Thanks for joining us, Ryan, and all the best for the future and safe flying.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, so we're going to, while we say our goodbyes to Ryan, what we're just going to do is we're going to play out the next part of our plane truce that I did with Captain Al, and this week we're talking about fuel and fuel issues. Hello and welcome to The Plain Truth, and this week we're going to be talking about fuel planning. Joining me as always is the legend that is Captain Al. Hi Captain Al.
Hello, how are you doing?
Yes, I'm very good, thank you, very good. Thank you for joining me again. And now the slightly unusual subject matter here. This actually is a conversation that was had during lockdown over a garden wall, as you might expect, with my neighbour, and they were referring to a flight that they'd had. Actually, we were just talking about flying and things, and they were talking about a flight where they had a bit of a nightmare, really, and they ended up with several go-arounds and ended up having to go to a different airport, I think, because of weather-related incidences and things. And she was actually mentioning one of the things that was making her most nervous was the fact that all of this extra time that they were in the air and how much, they know that they carry a little bit more fuel, but how much longer would they have been able to stay in the air, basically until something catastrophic happened, as I say, and it began to make her feel quite nervous as a nervous flyer anyway. So my question to you really, Al, is I know there's an element of contingency, if you like, when it comes to fuel loads and things like that. But what is the planning process involved in deciding how much fuel that you take on board, and realistically, how much further can you fly when it comes to your fuel load? If for example, you couldn't end up at the airport that you were hoping to.
Okay, what we'll do is we'll come back to go-arounds and bad weather towards the end of this, but let's just have a look at the sort of normal planning process, if you like. So we'll take a step back and think, if you're going to jump into your car and drive to from Bungay to Manchester tomorrow, it's what, about 200 or so miles?
Yeah, about ballpark figure somewhere around there.
Yeah. Okay. So how much fuel are you going to put in your car for this journey?
Oh, well, I'm a bit of one of those where I like to make sure that I've got a full tank before I go anywhere. So
you,
usually,
like most people, are going to go to the petrol station in advance of the journey and just fill it up, aren't you? Because then you know that you've got more than enough. That's going to give you what, 400-ish miles of range?
Yeah, about before 450, I think, in my C-Max, to be fair. Yeah, so
right,
fair old range.
Okay, right. Now, you're going to drive your coach the same journey.
Right.
Are you going to apply the same logic? Are you going to fill it up at the depot for your journey to Manchester?
The short answer is yes, I suppose. Now I can do about, I'm trying to think, it's about 1,200, 1,300 kilometres in a coach that I can do roughly on a fuel tank full. So, but again, you would take that into consideration, and you'd have to make a decision. As long as you've got enough to get there, you would then make a decision about whether you filled up or whatever at the other end.
Right. So without getting my calculator out, if you can do about 1,200 kilometres, what's that? That's about 800 miles or so, maybe a bit less. Right. So more than your car.
Yes, definitely.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So the fuel that you put in your coach, is it quite heavy?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, I mean, especially when we're doing things like local work and stuff, we only tend to put in, sort of 50, 100 litres at a time, because obviously weight is a huge impact on the miles to the gallon and all sorts.
Absolutely. So your coach burns significantly more fuel when it's full of fuel than when it's got an amount of fuel sufficient for the journey.
Yes.
So the point I'm trying to make is that unlike most car drivers, you are applying a different strategy when you're driving the coach to when you're driving your car.
100%, yeah.
Because you can carry a lot more fuel in the coach than is needed, and the fuel is heavy, and we've just mentioned that the consumption is considerably different.
Yeah. So
it's the same on an aeroplane.
Right.
So when we are embarking on a flight, we do not apply the strategy of, okay, well, it's 1,000 miles, so we'll just fill it up, and that'll give us, 4,500 miles. That will be enough, okay?
Right.
Because the cost of doing that are huge. And roughly speaking, ballpark figure, something like 3 or 4% of the fuel burn will just be in carrying the fuel that you don't need.
Yeah, okay.
You'll be burning fuel to carry fuel, okay? So we plan our fuel very carefully. Now, it's not just because of cost, although that is a considerable factor. If we fill the aeroplane up with fuel, we can't put the same payload onto it. So we can't put as many people and their bags or any cargo. So it's a commercial decision. So there has to be a framework, and there is, and it's set out in the rules and regulations. So let's look at the various parts of the journey, if you like. So when we, as passengers, get out onto the aeroplane, it's normally got the lights on, and it will have some form of air conditioning, whether it just be sort of ambient air or air-conditioned air. Would that be reasonable?
Yeah. No,
if it was the middle of the night, you wouldn't expect to get onto it and have to, illuminate by torchlight to get to your seat.
No, you wouldn't have to use your phone light or whatever to just get to the aircraft.
So in a lot of airports, we will take, and we've talked about this before, we'll take power from the ground, so from the airport, and they will power up our aeroplane. But eventually we need to disconnect that umbilical cord and be responsible for our own heat and light, as it were. So that uses the auxiliary power unit, a little jet engine usually in the tail of the aeroplane.
The APU.
There we go.
Yeah.
So that actually burns fuel. Not a lot, but it does.
And presumably that's basically just a glorified generator, essentially.
It's actually a very small jet engine. It's a sort of multi-million-pound gas turbine engine.
Okay.
It's a little jet engine in the back there. But we're also going to need to be able to start our engines and taxi out to the runway that we're going to depart from. So that's the first part of our fuel plan, and it's called taxi fuel. So it's the fuel from starting up the aeroplane, usually before the passengers get on, to getting to the departure runway. Now, if you're at somewhere that's very quiet, so shall we say Norwich, then you're not going to encounter too much in the way of taxi delays.
No.
But if you're at somewhere, say, for example, like Chicago O'Hare or Atlanta, then it may take you, or JFK when the weather's not so good, it might take you a very long time to get to the departure end of the runway. So maybe an hour or so, could even be worse than that.
Really? Gosh.
So that's the first part. And all of these are these days calculated by computer. So typical taxi times are taken into account, etc., etc. So that's the first bit of the fuel calculation, the taxi fuel. Right. Once you've got out onto the runway, you're then going to need fuel to take off, climb up to your initial cruising altitude, and then any further sort of step climbs. So sometimes if it's a long flight, you can't go up to your final cruising level because you're too heavy. So you go up to an intermediate level, burn off some fuel, then you're a bit lighter, you can go up and you can step up. Then sort of basically that's the cruise phase. All the way down through your descent and your approach and landing, and that's your trip fuel. So basically, from the time that you take off to the time that you land, that is the trip fuel calculation.
Okay.
Right. So we've got fuel to get us to the runway, and we've got fuel for us to land. Probably wise to have contingency fuel. You know, things don't always go as planned.
No.
So, like a lot of things in aviation, it's not just a simple figure, it's a complex equation. Now, I'll put this as simply as I can and then talk about what can be done. So the contingency fuel is typically 5% of the trip fuel.
Right.
So the trip fuel is the bit from starting your takeoff to the landing. So you take 5% of that figure, and that is your contingency. If there are some airports along the way that are favourable to you, you can reduce that down to 3%. And you might think, well, why would I want to do that? Well, you as the individual may not necessarily want to do that, but the company would like you to carry the least amount of unused fuel as possible. Because if everything goes to plan, you're not going to use this contingency fuel. But the rules say that you have to carry it. So between 3 and 5% is the figure for contingency. Now, I'm going to guess that that's probably less than what you thought it was going to be.
Very much so, yeah.
Okie dokie. Right, so that's contingency. There is one final bit of fuel that the rules say that you have to have, and that is final reserve fuel. Now, this is fuel sufficient to hold for 30 minutes at 1,500 feet. The reason that figure is chosen is it's quite low to the ground. So remember, aeroplanes burn less fuel the higher they are. So the closer to the ground, the fuel burns are higher. So it's basically 30 minutes of holding fuel at the planned destination at 1,500 feet. Okay?
And would things like local atmospherics and things like that be taken into consideration, or is it just a general figure?
It's just a general figure. Okay? Now, if you're operating to an airport with several runways and the weather is forecast to be good, these are independent runways, you do not need to take any fuel for a planned alternate destination. Okay?
Right.
And the rules allow you to do that. Your airline may say, well, that's a little bit too optimistic, so we will always carry alternate fuel. But there's no legal requirement to unless the company mandates it. So if the weather conditions are not forecast to be super favorable at your destination, you will then carry alternate fuel, which is the fuel from the point that the go-around is initiated, the whole missed approach, and then a climb up to your sort of cruising altitude to your alternate, then the descent, approach and landing. So in the example, say, of, let's pick something. Okay, so we're flying from Manchester to Birmingham.
Right.
And the weather at Birmingham is not particularly great. So if we can't land at Birmingham, we're going to go to Bristol where the weather is glorious.
Right.
So we'll have our taxi fuel, our trip fuel, our contingency fuel, our alternate fuel, and our contingency fuel, if I didn't already mention that, and our final reserve fuel. So that's the figure that we come up with. And that is calculated by a computer.
Right.
And then we have the opportunity as a crew or as a captain to take extra fuel. And
that's entirely at your discretion?
Well, that will come down to company policies. Most airlines these days won't give you carte blanche. They will give you a set of margins to operate within, shall we say. And different airlines have different levels of management of this strategy, because it's a bit like going into a casino and saying you can have as much money as you like.
Right, okay, yeah.
The way that you're going to bet is going to be quite different than if you've got a controlled amount of money, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, that's true, yeah.
Now, there is one other set of fuel that I've not mentioned, and that's something called additional fuel. And this would be something that would be put on if you are, say, for example, expecting low visibility procedures, so fog, snow, that sort of thing. So this is already planned by the computer. So it might say, okay, I'm going to give you 45 minutes of additional fuel because I know that the weather's not very good. And you might, as a captain, go, well, 45 minutes, that's a bit, tight. I'm going to take, at least an hour and a half. Right, so yeah. I'll put on another 45 minutes or whatever. But that's the nuts and bolts of it. Going back to the experience of your friend over the garden fence, where we know that the weather is going to be poor, we will plan to take, whether it be additional fuel, if it's something that typically when you have low visibility procedures at an airport, the number of takeoff and landings that can take place in a given hour are much, much less because everything slows down, just like on the motorway when it's heavy rain or fog. Yeah. But also we will then look at the big picture and say, okay, right, so it's forecast to be foggy, but by the time we arrive, it should be improving, but let's just give ourselves a bit of margin and we'll take an hour's worth of holding fuel or, whatever we feel fit. So there's always that element of what you might call professional planning,
right?
Based on what you as the operating crew within the company confined criteria determined to do. So it may well have been that for your friends that it was that when they landed wherever they diverted to, they may well have had copious amounts of fuel. Right. If that weather was anticipated to be that way. Typically, you're only allowed to do 2 approaches at an airfield with poor weather. You can do subsequent approaches, but there has to be a significant improvement.
Right.
The idea being is that the regulator doesn't want you to just keep trying and trying and trying.
Until you fall out of the sky, essentially.
Yeah. Well, typically what happens is that, like if you're trying to put, a screw into a piece of furniture or whatever, and you just get, and it's not quite working, you just get a bit more frustrated, and you become a bit more cavalier with it each time. Right. You just hit it with a hammer.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they're trying to avoid.
Trying to avoid, essentially get really annoyed with it. Well, I mean, it's essentially what I've learned from this actually is a much more scientific. I mean, I suppose from my perspective, you would sort of make sure you carried an extra 100 litres or whatever to make for what you were expecting in part of your journey. Essentially, what I've learned from this, Al, is it's actually a much more scientific, much more calculated decision. I mean, it's sort of worked out to the nearest litre almost what's required in the av fuel to do the job.
Yes, absolutely. And most modern airlines these days will monitor the amount of fuel that is being carried by crews, how much is being used, whether it matches what the predictions are, and these sort of things. So fuel is a massive, massive cost to airlines, both in the cost of purchasing it, but obviously ever increasingly with regards to CO2 emissions. So it is a very, very carefully calculated amount, and just throwing on some for mum and dad isn't the way that professional crews operate these days.
No. Well, it's a very comforting topic, Al. Thank you very much, as always.
It's a pleasure.
So, kicking off this week's first news story in the commercial segment is a story coming from the EDP24, which is one of our local rags here in the east of Anglia in the UK. And it's good news for us, actually, Matt, in Norwich, because our local airport, Norwich, they've had a special delivery.
No, you're wrong. That's London, Norwich.
London, Norwich.
Yes.
London, Norwich International Airport.
Correct.
So, in the early hours of Halloween, a passenger plane was lifted by crane over the Norwich Northern Distributor Road, or the NDR as we all love to call it here. After years of taking to the skies, it was making its final journey to the City of Norwich Aviation Museum, having been donated as an exhibit. Trevor Eady from the museum said its journey was made in two parts, one leg over the fence of Norwich Airport and onto the NDR, and the second over another fence onto the museum's land. With favourable weather conditions, the move had been completed by about 5 a.m. The aircraft was formerly operated by CityJet and has been a regular site at Norwich Airport since Air UK took delivery in 1983. The BAE 146 Avro RJ aircraft is a four-engine, high-wing, T-tailed aircraft which operated out of many city airports, and with its quiet operation having been the key to its success, it's been marketed as the Whisper Jet. It will be the only one of its kind on display at an aviation museum in the UK. Irish operator CityJet it withdrew all remaining BAE Systems Avro RJ85s, ending a 27-year association with the regional jet and its predecessor, the BAE 146. The aircraft, registration number Echo India Romeo Juliet Foxtrot, named Great Blasket Island, left Dublin Airport for Keflavik International Airport on November the 2nd. The 22-year-old aircraft will make a stopover in Iceland before flying onto the USA. Once the plane arrives at Spokane International Airport in Washington, it will be converted into a firefighting aircraft and then to service with Aero Elite. So CityJet acquired the 95-seat aircraft from Mizaba Airlines in 2007. It was used on behalf of Irish national flag carrier Aer Lingus on flights between London City and Dublin airports. CityJet chief executive Pat Bryan said for almost 30 years the Avro BAE 146 and RJ85 fleet has served us well, and for some there were a few tears shed today when Echo India Romeo Juliet Foxtrot departed for the last time. He said that we are now looking to the future as we grow our services on more modern aircraft, but there will always be a place in our hearts for the venerable Avros. CityJet no longer flies passenger services under its own branding. It currently operates a fleet of 20 CRJ 900 aircraft from Copenhagen, providing wet leases for SAS. It's good to see, Matt. This is great news because obviously Norwich, the Aviation Museum is really good. We were there for our 100th show.
It feels like a lifetime ago now.
And they've got a Vulcan there, they've got a Nimrod there on site, and they've also got obviously this RJ there now, and they've also got a large amount of other static military and civilian aircraft on site, and it's really cheap to get in as well. That's just worth making a note of that as well. It is really cheap.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because it was, as I say, Nev, we'll have to when all this nonsense is over, we'll have to have a little bit of a meet up there, because it is a truly wonderful museum. It's worth worth a visit, definitely.
Looking forward to that. And I must say, although it's the BA 146 is coming in for a bit of stick in the chat room, but I've got a very soft spot for it. And as it was built not that far from where I live, back in the day, 1983, 84, I think it was. But brilliant aircraft, which has served many routes really well around the world. So, yeah, it'd be great to get back to Norwich, wouldn't it?
This has just been sent in by Mr. Warner. This is a photo of is it a Quintigs RJ100?
Oh, Quintex, yeah.
Oh, Quintex, there we go.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
absolutely.
The RJ, yeah.
Live photos coming in, on the fly. There we go. See what I did there. Okay, sorry.
I see what you
Moving
mean
on.
about the love for the chat room. I'm not going to say them all, but there's one on there that says BAE 146, 4 hair dryers in close formation.
Oh.
Anyway.
That's a bit brutal.
So, Matt, you've got the next story, and it's all about the buy one, get one frees.
Right, okay. I'm not really sure what to do with that information. It's, CBSnews.com is the website, and just Airline Deals is the headline. So the airline industry is ramping up its incentives to travellers, with airlines worldwide attempting to coax passengers into returning to the skies by offering 2-for-1 deals and other creative promotions. Alaska Air Group had a buy one, get one free offer, which ended on the 31st of October, in which customers who bought one ticket could get a second ticket on the same itinerary for just the cost of the taxes and fees. Alaska Air marketed the deal as a way for customers to get an entire row of seats to themselves, as middle seats were blocked out for social distancing during the promo. Malaysia's largest airline, Air Asia, is currently offering unlimited flights within the country at a fixed price at £95 for unlimited travel up until June 2021. Ireland-based Ryanair is giving customers a buy one, get one free ticket on flights across the United Kingdom. It's the first time the budget carrier has ever offered such a promotion. Such incentives bring in little revenue, but the true goal behind the deals is to get people talking about their flights. Airlines are hoping that recent passengers will tell friends and family how clean and safe their trips were, and slowly eating away at the fear of flying that has taken hold as a result of a certain pandemic that I'm not going to say out loud. In the UK, TUI has shaken off lockdown woes by announcing flights to new holiday destinations from Norwich Airport, which is yet more good news for our local international London-based airport. Next winter, flights on offer from TUI will include those to Tenerife, and from summer 2022 routes will also include Corfu, Dalaman, a name
Corfu?
Sorry?
Corfu?
Corfu. Heraklion, whatever that is.
Heraklion.
Bless you. Ibiza, Menorca, Palma, Rhodes, and Paphos. Richard Pace, managing director of Norwich Airport, said, "We welcome TUI's announcement and look forward to seeing a return to passenger growth." Which, let's be honest, do you think this is the solution, though? Maybe sort of trying to encourage people to fly like locally, using their local airports. I mean, does it make it any safer, or does it not really matter? I don't know. Nev, I'm going to ask this question to you because obviously you do a bit more flying than the rest of us. Do you think local is the answer, or is it just as safe at Heathrow as it is?
Well, no, it's not about safety, is it really? Because I mean, it's safe whatever way you do it. But the problem has been is the regional airports, certainly in the UK, have been decimated over the last few months, with Flybe obviously going out of business, although hopefully they might come back next year. But there's, I think the importance of regional airports cannot be understated. They provide a very, very good service to people, at either end of the country and in between as well. So, yeah.
Good point.
I think this is important for me and you, especially in the area we live, Matt, that to have this ability to be able to fly to these destinations from an airport that is 20 minutes away.
Absolutely. I'm 100% with you there, Carlos. The only issue is when you can buy a flight for £70 or £80 to say, let's use Toulouse as an example, right? If you wanted to do that, the same flight that myself and Owen went on, I don't know how many years ago now, 2 years ago, whatever it is, when we went to Toulouse, and I think the return flights were like less than 50 quid each or something stupid. They weren't Yeah, they weren't that expensive.
Yeah.
I dare say if you wanted to do something similar from Norwich, you'd be looking at £350.
Exactly.
And
that's
is the
where
issue.
they need to sort things out.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, because it's one of those. It's like, because you're never going to get someone like Ryanair going to a small airport like Norwich.
God, can you imagine, Matt?
Yeah. I mean,
Wow.
yeah, yes. I'm being told apparently they used to fly into Newquay all the time. Actually, yes, they did, because I nearly went on a flight into there. But I guess Norwich being in essentially the arse end of nowhere, I suspect there is not enough footfall, shall we say, to tempt a low cost carrier into the area. But anyway, Nev, you've got the next story.
Nev VAT.
Yeah, this is a bit of a
brace yourselves, everyone.
Can of worms coming up here. Stand by.
Yes.
This is on the trbusiness.com, and it was also on Sky News as well. Headline says Heathrow Airport to launch legal review over VAT-free shopping ban. Now, before we start, it's important to note that duty and VAT are not the same things, but Heathrow Airport is preparing to launch a legal challenge against the government's decision to ban VAT-free shopping for tourists to the UK from the end of this year with the end of the Brexit transition period.
I beg your pardon?
Yes, we haven't used that word for a while, have we?
It's like welcoming back an old friend, isn't it?
I know. Well, I think there'll be plenty to talk about
now
as we come into the end of December, I'm sure.
Yes.
Well, the duty-free shopping giant, and Global Blue, the tax refund specialist, are also said to be participating in the legal action. So let's have a look at what the changes are. Currently, non-EU visitors to the UK are able to claim a refund of the VAT on goods bought in the UK and taken home. From the 1st of January, this is to be removed, making the UK the only country in Europe not to offer this to international visitors. Just like to point out that we are not actually in Europe at this point, but anyway. Passengers travelling from the UK to non-EU countries will no longer be able to buy tax-free goods such as electronics and clothing at airports. This concession will be removed following concerns that the VAT is not always passed on to consumers at airports and that it puts high street stores at a disadvantage. The VAT retail export scheme will end, and overseas visitors will no longer be able to obtain VAT refunds on items bought in British shops to take home as hand luggage. The scheme is to be removed over concerns that it is costly and overly burdensome for HMRC to run, with that likely to increase if EU visitors could make use of it at the end of the transition period. But because of Brexit, two more things need to happen so that EU and non-EU duty standards are aligned. British passengers travelling to EU countries will be able to buy duty-free goods, including alcohol and tobacco products, at British international ports of departure. This is likely to increase sales of alcohol and tobacco at airports. The allowance for duty-free alcohol, tobacco and other goods brought in by passengers from non-EU countries will be significantly increased. So why are Heathrow and other airports actually challenging the ban? Well, the judicial review, which has been under discussion for several weeks, is understood to have been drawn up on the basis that the consultation ahead of the Treasurer's announcement of the revised policy was unfair. One source close to the move accused the Treasury of failing to conduct proper and detailed economic analysis and failing to understand the implications this will have for job losses across the sectors. Retail bosses, including the head of Marks and Spencer and Selfridges, have previously warned that banning VAT-free shopping for overseas visitors would give billions of pounds worth of reduction to spending in stores and cost the Exchequer somewhere in the region of £2 billion in lost tax revenue. It would also put around 70,000 jobs at risk. In a joint statement issued to Sky News, the claimant said, "We continue to work with Treasury Minister and officials regarding this matter." Some airports will obviously see a large gain from this. Stansted for one, as only a handful of flights are extra EU, and the duty-free income from alcohol and tobacco sales that will be made on UK to EU flights will increase. However, for international airports, this is going to be a major difference in revenue. So for any shops that do not sell products, that sell products which are covered by duty free, this will be disastrous for them potentially, which is clothes, electronics, and jewellery, for example. So there's a bit to be worked out here, I think, and I would imagine with the government slightly involved in other things at the moment, this may have been kicked down the road slightly, but they have to come up with some sort of solution before the end of this year.
Is there something else going on that might be keeping them busy, Nev?
Maybe there is. Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. Well, I mean, well done for a sterling job in trying to make an impossible subject sort of vaguely palatable. Good work there, sir.
Well, so I think this is a subject which has been bubbling under for months, probably years, actually, and we're just going to have to see where it ends up. As always, it'll be some sort of, arrangement or compromise or what have you. But there's a bit to play out yet, I think.
Indeed. Does anybody use duty free?
I do from Gibraltar, yes, and from Fuerteventura, yes, very much so. Yeah. No, I always bring it back in with me. Yes, I don't actually take it out with me. I always bring it back in.
I don't think I ever bought anything from the duty free when I was going from the UK back to the US, other than maybe a chocolate bar or something like that.
Oh. Marmite, yeah. Contraband. Yeah.
No. You're missing the whole thing here, guys. You know what everyone buys from duty free?
Gin?
No. There's one thing that everyone here has brought from duty free once in their life. No. Toblerone.
Oh, I buy it from the supermarket up the road.
No, that's the only place you can buy Toblerone, I'm sure of it.
No, it's not. It's
in the chat room, Stephen H. just got Toblerone. Yeah. It's a prize. You know what the prize is? It's a Cadbury bar.
Yeah. We'll order you a Cadbury's bar. Yeah, very good. Lovely. Okay, we'll move on to the next story then, please. Armando, this is with you.
Yeah, this next story is from either BAM now or BHAM now, or maybe it's just Birmingham now. But a new Birmingham, actually, when I first saw this story, I thought we were talking about Birmingham in the UK, but we're actually talking about Birmingham in Alabama. So Birmingham Aerospace Aviation Public Charter School will touch down in 2022. I love the picture that they have. They have a Lockheed Constellation on there. So Alabama Aerospace and Aviation High School, I'm just going to call it the AAAHS, is a free aerospace-focused public charter school. Starting in Birmingham in 2022, here are the basics. So AAAHS will be a free aviation aerospace-focused public charter school located on the campus of the Southern Museum of Flight. Behind AAAHS is Birmingham native and program director of the local startup Build Up, Ruben Morris. He says, I grew up with a dream of flying F-15s and retiring as a Delta pilot, but no one could tell me what to do to make that dream happen. It was a dream deferred. So while Morris is unable to find the resources, or was unable to find the resources needed to become a pilot, the concept of flying never truly subsided in him. So in Birmingham, he saw a large opportunity for aviation and aerospace, along with a need for pilots, especially aircraft mechanics of color. He also wondered why Birmingham, home to the state's largest airport, wasn't exploding in aviation training and jobs. He says, I started dreaming about what it would be like to build a school that could produce the next generation of pilots, mechanics, engineers, and computer scientists. Pretty soon, his vision became a new route for the deferred dreams of his childhood. So according to Morris, the school will feature strong core academics along with 4 distinct industry-aligned pathways focused on aviation and aerospace. They are aerospace, drone, and pilot licensing. So full-size pilot and drone pilot licensing, aircraft mechanics, and computer sciences. The school will house grades 9 through 12, with a full capacity being from 550 to 600 students. There will also be sports, clubs, extracurricular activities for students to participate in. So how is this school different than a regular high school? Their goal is to prepare students for success in college, the military, and aerospace, defense, and aviation industry. One of the main differences featured at AAAHS is that their hands-on approach to teaching, for example, will have students access to flight and drone simulators so they can earn hours towards receiving their pilot's licenses. AAAHS is also partnering with Tuskegee University to provide students with dual enrollment courses. Great story here. I've been to Alabama. Alabama actually has a much more rich aviation history than most people think. Huntsville, Alabama is a home to the Huntsville Space Center. There's just hundreds, only been around for 100 and so years, but probably about as much, right? Almost 100 years of aviation history in Alabama. And then we all know the Tuskegee Airmen, and I've been to the Tuskegee Airfield. It is a city. It's just Tuskegee, Alabama. Yeah, this is very cool. Yeah, and I believe Captain Jeff went to school in Alabama also. So very cool.
Oh, it's very impressive alumni then. If Captain Jeff was there, I mean, goodness me, we need to immediately find out where the plaque is.
Maybe he'll be the guest speaker at the ribbon cutting.
Oh, I think that's completely correct. Yeah.
I'd imagine Jeff has got his star in the pavement outside.
Well, of course,
with his
absolutely.
name.
I expect nothing less.
Yeah. So, moving on to the next story, Nev. You've got one about drones doing some weird stuff.
Yeah, shame we haven't got Ryan with us still, actually, isn't it? Because this is on the livescience.com website, and it says, with an estimated 300 active volcanoes on Earth, the challenge is how to monitor them all to send out early warnings before they erupt. Changes to sulfur dioxide and carbon dioxide gas emissions can signal more activity in a volcano, but measuring volcanic gas emissions is also no easy task. Now, researchers have designed specially adapted drones to help gather data from an active volcano in Papua New Guinea. The drones could help local communities monitor nearby volcanoes and forecast future eruptions. Their measurements could also tell us more about the most inaccessible, highly active volcanoes on the planet and how volcanoes contribute to the global carbon cycle. The Manam volcano is located on an island just 10 kilometres wide that sits off the north coast of PNG. The island is home to over 9,000 people, and Manam Motu, as it's known locally, is one of the most active volcanoes in the country. In 2004, a major eruption from Manam forced the entire island to evacuate to the mainland. Manam hasn't been studied in detail, but we could see satellite data that it was producing strong emissions, said the volcanologist Emma Lou from University College London, who led the research team. Manam's steep slopes make it incredibly dangerous to even contemplate collecting gas samples on foot, whereas the drones could safely fly right into the billowing plumes, helping the research team measure its volcanic gas emissions more accurately. Drones flew over 2,000 metres high into Manam's highly turbulent volcanic plumes and some 6 kilometres away from their launching pad, well out of sight of the pilots. On each flight, the drone took images of Manam and its two craters, measuring the gas composition right above the rising plumes, and collected 4 bags full of extra gas for rapid analysis when the aircraft touched down. So that's pretty handy use of the technology there, isn't it? Especially where it's completely inaccessible to humans.
Very, very cool video that I was playing out while you were reading that, Nev. And if you're listening to the audio version of the show, make sure you look at this story on in the show notes, because, as I say, the video is absolutely cracking on this.
I wonder how many drones they lose in this particular exercise. Because, you've only got to get a bit of sort of heat or something that might affect the flying characteristics of said drone, and it could end up gone.
True.
And they're not using kind of cheap drones either, are they?
No.
They are using DJIs, I think, on there as well.
Yeah, I know. As I say, because there must be sort of massive thermals and stuff. I mean, the heat rising and all that kind of thing. It must have a real effect on the way that the thing flies.
And also the camera, Matt. The camera lens.
True. Yeah, well, the camera lens will probably be okay a bit longer than things like propellers and things like you just sort of expect them to sort of melt, really. But anyway, there we are. It is what it is.
So, moving on to the last story. This one is on simple flying. Boeing.com this comes from. And for those of you who are tired of having a boring office or an office in a building or, in an office here at home, how about having a Boeing 727 office?
Oh, my goodness.
Because a former Japan Airlines Boeing 727 is to become a Bristol office space. So the Boeing 727, once flown by Japan Airlines, will soon become an office and event space in Bristol here in the UK. A local businessman by the name of Johnny Palmer made big news in Bristol after he purchased the 53-year-old out-of-service Boeing 727 from Cotswold Airport, formerly RAF Kemble. 37-year-old Palmer is the managing director and founder of Bitch, a UK-based event production company. The aircraft will be transported some 35 miles down the road to Brislington Trading Estate along the M4 and M32 in February next year, where it will be set in place at its new home, installed on top of shipping containers. These containers will be covered with paintings of clouds to make it look like it's flying. Palmer also hopes to use the space for private dining events, arranging to have local chefs take over the kitchen. Of course, this will only take place after COVID restraints are lifted. The Boeing 727 was first delivered to JAL, or Japan Airlines, back in December 1967. The 727-100 is 133 feet long, or 40.5 meters, and typically flew 106 passengers in two classes. This particular jet would have likely flown domestic services. It then flew as a corporate jet registered in the United States and then in the Cayman Islands, flying under registrations November 445 Sierra, Victor Romeo Charlie Bravo Echo, Victor Romeo Charlie Lima Mike, and Victor Romeo Charlie Mike November. And finally, it ended up with the registration Victor Papa Charlie Mike November. I have to say, guys, and we were talking about this yesterday on the Zoom call, me and John, that if I had a big enough garden and I had the money, I would...
And you weren't married to your wife.
And I wasn't married. I'd be divorced. I would love to have the fuselage. I'd live in a fuselage of an aircraft.
I mean, certainly the video that I was playing there, I mean, it looks very plush and comfortable and all that kind of thing. I just have to do a sort of quick hats off here to Mr. Warner, because as we were reading out that story, I noticed my phone go off, and this very picture of that very aircraft that he took winged its way literally to me. So this is that very aircraft that he just pinged.
Oh, parked at Kemble, yeah.
And he doesn't have the luxury of the latency either this time, so it's all very good. Just like wow. Our audience are amazing, aren't they?
And I'll tell you what, we were saying as well, me and John were saying yesterday, there are still 727s still flying in the world at the moment, doing various jobs and stuff. Well, I think we saw one of these at Barber a few years ago, guys.
Yeah, that's true. I feel like maybe we've found our location for the 400th. No, might be a bit out of our price range, perhaps.
I think we'll give Andrew a ring at the plane reclaimers and see if we
might have one kicking around.
Can't nab a 747.
Yeah,
an XBA
we'll put some
one.
banners up inside it. You know, make it look nice. You know,
yeah.
Oh dear.
So that is where we are going to bring the commercial news to a close. So we're going to move on then to some military, so I'm going to hand things over to Armando.
Okay, not what the show notes says, but good job, Carlos.
I was waiting for someone to press a button, but there was no button pressing going on.
How about I just do my usual? Matt, if you're willing to press the button, do you mind hitting the military button?
Do anything for you, mate. Here we go.
It's more time for an after party at the end, let's be honest.
All right, guys. So this first story is from thedrive.com, amongst other places, 1,000 other places that you can probably find some kind of summary on this. But last week, the U.S. Special Operations Forces, including members from the U.S. Navy's Elite SEAL Team 6, have rescued an American citizen who was kidnapped just days before that in the northwest African country of Niger, in a raid in neighboring Nigeria. You can read more about that abduction of the 27-year-old Philip Walton from his home in the Nigerian village of Masalata, less than 5 miles from the Nigerian border on October 26. There was some previous reporting on that. At the time, at least the Drive had predicted that there was going to be some type of special operations mission to rescue Mr. Walton. So ABC News was the first to report the operation, which occurred at an as yet undisclosed location in northern Nigeria. It was conducted with the cooperation of the Nigerian forces. The Pentagon has now confirmed that the rescue mission took place on the early hours of October 31st, 2020, and was successful, with Walton now safely in the care of the U.S. State Department. So according to a Pentagon spokesman, they said that U.S. forces conducted a hostage rescue operation during the early hours of 31 October to recover an American citizen held hostage by a group of armed men. This American citizen is safe and is now in the care of the U.S. State Department. No U.S. military personnel were injured during the operation. We appreciate the support of our international partners in conducting this operation. So details about the exact composition of the raiding force beyond the inclusion of the SEAL teams or the SEAL team are limited. The CIA provided intelligence about Walton's location, and the Marine Corps Special Operations units deployed to Northwest Africa helped determine where he was being held. That's all according to ABC News. The raid also included an extremely long-distance movement of forces via multiple C-17 Globemasters, transport aircraft, and the employment of a quartet, I like that, a quartet, of CV-22B Ospreys, tilt rotors, and MC-130, probably MC-130J special operations transports, which were pushed through Rota, Spain before continuing on to their target. AC-130 gunships and a large contingent of aerial refueling tankers also supported this operation. The armed group who took Walton remains unidentified, but it is said to have not been associated with any known terrorist group in the region, pointing to some form of criminal enterprise. This would align with some of the intelligence reports about the circumstances of Walton's abduction. However, ABC News at least reported that criminal groups in the region do have a history of selling foreign hostages to terrorist organizations. So kudos to those special operations air crews and the joint force, the Marines, the Navy SEALs, and everybody that conducted that operation. This is one of the things that is rehearsed incessantly in the military, especially in special operations, especially joint operations in austere environments. So in this case, it worked out very well. So congratulations to them. And if anybody ever takes a look at a map, it'll mislead you how far it is from Europe to Nigeria. And when you start...
What's a map?
Yeah, Google Earth nowadays.
Right, Google Maps. No, I'm fine. It's all right. I'm fully on board now. Yeah, sorry. I thought you were talking about one of those paper things that you used to have to fold out.
They probably had some of those on board, actually. But I'll bet you if you use the little ruler tool in Google Earth and drew a line from London to Nigeria, you would probably realize how far that distance actually is. So again, kudos to these guys. Well done.
Absolutely. So on to story number 2, and Nev, this is with you.
Yes, this is on the taskandpurpose.com, and a bit of sad news here, actually. It says that the Blue Angels Legacy Hornets are going to be conducting their final Pensacola flyover. And this is going to take place we'll come up with the date in a minute, I'm sure, but on Wednesday, actually, they're going to conduct a final flight on the FA-18 A, B, C and D Legacy Hornets, which is going to take place at between 4 and 4:30 in the afternoon. The final flight of the Legacy Hornets signifies the official transition of the Blue Angels to the FA-18 E and F Super Hornet platform. We are incredibly honoured to have the opportunity to salute those teams who have flown, maintained and supported this platform over 3 decades of service, says Commander Brian Kesslering, US Navy Blue Angels commanding officer and flight leader. We deeply appreciate the expertise and operational knowledge Blue Angels past and present have brought to the team, and we look forward to enhancing our operations as we fully transition to flying the Super Hornet. The 2020 show season marked the end of the service life of the aircraft, which the team has flown for 34 years. The 2021 show season will be the Blue Angels' first year flying the Super Hornet platform. Undoubtedly, 2020 presented the team with unprecedented challenges. That said, the unique nature of this year also allowed our team to deepen our interaction with past teams, in particular those teams that had transitioned to new aircraft during their tenure, said Kesslering. The engagement has helped us lay the foundation for a safe and effective transition for our team's pilots, support and maintenance personnel, as well as postured us to take on the high operating tempo of the team's highly anticipated 2021 air show season and its 75th anniversary. The final flight will take off and land in Pensacola, lasting approximately 30 minutes. Flyover locations include, but not limited to, Orange Beach, Gulf Shores, Fort Morgan, Ferry Pass, Navarre Beach, Pensacola Beach, Perdido Key Community Maritime Park, and Palafox Street in downtown Pensacola. The Blue Angels will be visible from many locations throughout the Pensacola area, and along this route the public is reminded to continue to follow health and safety guidelines from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. Just a correction, actually, this actually happened on Wednesday of this week, the 4th of November, so it would have been fascinating to see all that, I'm sure, but incredible, Armando, that they've had such a, well, it's over 3 decades of service with this aircraft, isn't it?
Yeah, I didn't realize that myself, that that is a long time flying one airplane, which probably explains why they're so good at doing so.
Yeah.
You know, and I guarantee you that in the off season this year, they're going to be working hard with that Super Hornet to have the same level of accuracy, you know, with the right amount of risk. Because go ahead, Matt.
So forgive my naivety here. Now, the Super Hornet rings a bell for me. Isn't that what the Red Arrows fly?
No,
it is not.
So what do the Red Arrows fly then?
The Hawk.
Yeah.
Oh, is it? It's the Hawker? No, right. Sorry.
Hawk,
Why do I know that name then?
I think it's because that was the one that me, you, and Micah looked round at.
It's a Hawk T1.
The Pittsburgh.
Hawk T1. Sorry.
The Pittsburgh Air Show, Matt.
Okay. All right. It really jumped out at me as something that I thought I knew, but clearly not.
Actually, Jonathan Warner in the chat room says that apparently 1 F-18 is great, 6 is just better.
Right, I mean, you could say that about life in general, though, couldn't you, really? I mean, you know, why have 1 when you can have 6?
Actually, Jonathan says, one of the things Jonathan says, he's always wanted to see the Blue Angels.
Oh, really?
Mm.
Indeed. So I'm going to ask a question here. What is the difference between the Hornet and the Super Hornet, then, Armando?
There's a technology insertion in there, so I think it's got more advanced avionics, more advanced targeting pods. I think it's got a little bit heavier payload. I know performance-wise, it can take off and land in shorter distances. I think probably that the biggest thing in it is your avionics and your integration, making it a really interconnected fighter with a lot more advanced avionic systems.
Wow. Okay.
Matt, chat room, Micah.
Oh, okay. I haven't got access to that currently.
Oh,
sorry.
I'm
in the wrong
Micah says in the chat room, Matt, that apparently you interviewed an F-18 pilot at Farnborough in 2016.
Oh, okay. All right. Yes, and also apparently it was the first time that we all worked together, which is quite nice, isn't it?
Oh.
Was that F-18? Was that F-18 pilot Nick Anderson?
No, this is 2016. 2016, Armando.
Oh, he didn't like us back then.
Not 1916. Anyway, next story is... Love you, Nick. Love you, Nick.
Yeah.
So this next story, it's a good, heartwarming story. This is actually from the Air Force, from Air Education and Training Command, from Columbus Air Force Base, Mississippi. They say for many, becoming a pilot in the United States Air Force is a dream that can be achieved through the traditional means of commissioning as an officer, but every so often it is a unique story brought to life in this process. This is the story of Second Lieutenant Clifford Moi, 41st Flying Training Squadron student pilot, currently undergoing SUPT, or Specialized Undergraduate Pilot Training at Columbus Air Force Base. Moi is originally from the Republic of Cameroon, a country in Africa that shares borders with both Nigeria and Chad. He is, along with millions of others, entered into a diversity visa lottery with the hopes of immigrating. This U.S. government lottery program provides countries with a historically low rate of immigration to the U.S. a chance to move here on a green card visa. So to qualify, the applicant must have a high school diploma, 2 years work experience in the last 5 years in an occupation that requires at least 2 years of training, if you can track that. The winners are actually chosen randomly by a computer program. So Lieutenant Moi, along with 3,000 of others, were selected from Cameroon's population, 25 million. He won the lottery. He was contacted by the U.S. Embassy, got his paperwork together, and came to America in 2013. The challenges began immediately. His first obstacle was to quickly overcome the language barrier. According to him, he says, the language, culture, weather, and even food was so different here. My friends laughed at me because I thought August was cold. Even through the challenges, I knew it was a matter of time before I overcame those obstacles by making friends, watching television, and adapting to the area. Moi actually enlisted into the Air National Guard in Michigan as a medical logistics specialist. While going through basic military training, he worked with an immigration officer to receive his citizenship upon graduation. In his Air Force enlisted career, he also worked at the Michigan National Guard Joint Force Headquarters as part of a state partnership program office. Later, he was selected to represent his new homeland as part of the honor guard responsible for carrying the American and state flags at official ceremonies in partner countries. So with the help of the Michigan National Guard State Tuition Assistance Program and using his GI Bill, which is an educational advantage or program for military, he went to college at the College of Aviation at Western Michigan University to pursue an aviation science degree while getting his private pilot's license. After completing his bachelor's degree program, he was hired by the 171st Air Refueling Squadron, 127th Wing at Selfridge Air National Guard Base in Michigan. Now, set with the calling of becoming a pilot, he was sent to officer training school and commissioned as an Air Force officer in 2019 and ended up there at Columbus, Mississippi. So now he is in phase 2 of SUPT, or pilot training, learning aircraft flight characteristics, emergency procedures, takeoff and landing procedures, aerobatics, formation flying, all in the T6 Texan. No big deal, just a few things here and there. After that, he will continue on to phase 3 in the airlift tanker track, flying the T-1 Jayhawk. This course centers on crew coordination, crew management, resource management, instrument training, cross-country flying, amongst other things. After he graduates, he'll be back at Altus Air Force Base in Oklahoma, where he'll fly the KC-135 Stratotanker before returning back to Michigan as an official Air Force pilot. So this is a great story, and it should be a nice motivating story for any of those that are overseas thinking that becoming a U.S. Air Force pilot isn't achievable for them. This is just proof that with hard work, you can do anything.
Incredible, isn't it? Absolutely love it. And what a great story. You know, that sort of reaching out, you know, sort of sharing the love a bit, really. I'm all for anything like this, really.
Yeah, me too.
So we're going to close with the military then for this week. Thanks, Armando, for all the stories. Good work, as always. And we're going to move on to some listener feedback. So, Armando, we've got some feedback with this first one with you. And who's this one from?
Yeah, this is from Jacob Darlington-Brown, and this is in reference to the story we did last week about those Lufthansa 747s that were stuck in the Netherlands. His feedback says, hey guys, with the story of the 747 not being able to take off from a smaller airport because of mysterious red tape, it's possible that the reason they're not allowed to take off is because that particular airport's fire and rescue service isn't certified to handle the big jets. Each airport is certified with a particular fire and rescue category, with category 10 being at the top level, category 9 slightly less, et cetera, et cetera. So it's his guess that for a 747 to be able to take off, it needs a certain level of fire rescue category. And if that airport doesn't have it, it won't be able to take off unless they call up a few extra trucks to come over from a larger airport to increase their category to the next level up. To be there in case something goes kaboom, in his words. That's his 2 Australian dollar cents from Jacob Darlington-Brown.
I mean, I actually saw this email come in actually during the week, and I sort of replied to him, and it was, because I mean, I was making a bit of a sort of laugh, well, not a laugh and a joke out of it. It was just like, the tarmac's hard enough and all that kind of thing. It can take the weight. What it was, it didn't even pop into my head that there could be that might even be the reason. Because as I read that email, I just thought, yeah, that actually does kind of make perfect sense, doesn't it?
I will bet you that is just one of the obstacles that these guys have to go through right now to try to get those airplanes out of there. I tried to look up for some follow-ups on this, and it really is. I mean, there was a miscommunication. They thought that these aircraft were going to go in, land for their last time, and be disassembled right there on that airfield. And apparently nobody told Lufthansa that.
No. Oops. Yeah,
I'm sure they were probably wondering why they were driving up with like this big sledgehammer machine cutter,
cutting machines,
plane reclaimers,
torches, and all
that
kind of thing.
Instead of a jet bridge and a nice Mercedes bus.
You want to do what with the engines? Sorry. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Indeed. I think we've got a question. We've got a
Masha in the chat room makes a very good point.
Good point. Yeah.
Wouldn't they have needed the same for landing?
It's possible. I actually don't know the real answer to that. I don't know if they had special permits to go in there, going in there light and, with a certain amount of fuel and a certain amount of people on board that they may have been able to. I'm sure all of that was pre-planned.
Before. Yeah, absolutely.
Look, Lufthansa, if you're listening and you want to donate a 747 to PTUK with some land, we'll gladly take one.
I've got enough PTUK crap in my shed already. I can't.
Matt's got a huge back garden.
Not enough for a 747. I don't think I'd get a Cessna in it at the moment.
I think you could probably fit a 747 tire in your back garden.
Possibly. There is a slim chance, yes.
What Matt's failed to tell everyone is the fact that Matt's still got a massive swimming pool inflated in his back garden.
It needs to be silence immediately. Actually,
Anyway.
Do you know what? When we were talking about that story, Armando, I was actually thinking because there was quite often a time where you give me like when you were living here and so many times like I get a message from you because you were literally flying overhead and all that kind of thing. I sort of saying about that and that. I miss those days, dude.
Yeah. Now we have flight radar, but yeah, I would usually send a command and control text to Matt and Carlos and saying, "Hey, we're using your house as a waypoint tonight."
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because you can see there's a massive, like an old style mill where I live. So you've got quite a good marker there as a sort of standing out point as to where I go. And I live literally next door to the old mill in Tower Mill Road, literally. So there we go.
Yeah, we used the North Sea quite a bit for our overwater training, and Bungie made a great turn point for us at 500 feet in the middle of the night.
Yeah, don't I know it?
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
Thanks for that. Your fault. Yeah. Okay, on to the next email then, please, Carlos.
So the next email is from Richard Adams, and the subject is the forthcoming lecture at about the Air Transport Auxiliary. So he says in his feedback, you'll be glad to hear that there is another Air Transport Auxiliary Zoom lecture coming in November from the Maidenhead Heritage Centre. This one is about the 173 civilians that flew for White Waltham-based Air Transport Auxiliary that lost their lives in World War II. Very appropriate. The lectures is to be on the 11th. If any listeners would like to receive log-on details for the lecture, all they've got to do is email info@maidenheadheritage.org.uk, and you will receive within 24 hours before the lecture. While they are free, the museum would appreciate donations, of course, as they have not been able to open physically much this year. Yeah, very true. And you can also go to maidenheadheritage.org.uk/donate if you want to donate as well to that great charity. Another thing of interest is a chance to enter a raffle for a 1 in 1,000 chance of winning a 45-minute Spitfire trip, wow, along the Dover coastline.
Wow.
While the tickets are quite expensive at 20 quid. Yeah, okay. Well, tickets are expensive at 20 quid each. The odds are pretty good, especially when you consider that it would cost you £3,900 plus for the same trip if you just turned up with your checkbook. The funds are to be split between the British Aerobatics team and the Douglas Barber Foundation. And there's also some links to go with that. Will be in the show notes.
I don't know if it's because. Sorry, I know you've got a little bit more to that email, but I don't know if it's because obviously Remembrance Day is literally round the corner. Whether the thought of flying over Dover in a Spitfire,
wow.
Flying over the white cliffs of Dover. I mean, I've got Vera Lynn in my ears now singing that song. That'd be something quite special, wouldn't it? Especially, this time of year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. The Douglas Barber Foundation is a great charity that helps disabled and otherwise disadvantaged people. You may have seen them on TV last year when two severely disabled people they helped fly actually ended up piloting their own aircraft at a display in Duxford. In normal years, they said they usually spend weekends volunteering. It says it is time at flying kids and sometimes their parents for short trips around the island. For a busy day of fun. Hopefully it may happen again next summer. Yes, we do hope things happen again next summer. Just imagine if Nev entered the raffle and won.
Ooh, I say.
He'd never, ever be able to top that for NPE material, would he?
Good point.
Keep up the great work, Richard. And also 2 points to add as well on this. The lectures are available as a recording after the fact. You can email them at info@maidenheadheritage.org.uk to request a copy. And also the closing date for the raffle is January the 12th, 2021. So 20 quid, get out your wallet, Christmas presents for your family and friends, a £20 ticket to try and win this prize to win that 45-minute Spitfire trip along the Dover coastline. And I honestly, I've seen the videos on YouTube of this happening, and it would be wow.
Yeah, it really
would.
It
something
really
to
would.
win.
So we're going to start wrapping bits and pieces up now. Now, Nev, you were supposed to be doing a little bit of flying this week, but of course that's sort of come to a bit of a grinding halt.
Yes, I was supposed to be going to Gothenburg on Sunday for the week, but the government shut the corridor between the UK and Sweden. I think it was yesterday, and also to Germany as well, and also to Denmark. So that scuppered all that for a while. So I should be working at home.
I'll be working from home like the rest of us. Yeah.
Foreseeable future as well.
Indeed. What about you, Carlos? What have you got in the can, as it were?
Just a busy week coming up. We are very busy at the minute with haulage and stuff, so we've got lots going on at work.
Everybody needs courier drivers at the moment.
Everyone needs courier drivers, exactly. Yeah. And I've just planning on relieving some money from the joint account for buying some of these lottery tickets, or these tickets for the prize raffle.
I'm sure the wife will be delighted. That's great news. I'm not really up to much this week. It's just sort of so although we're in lockdown here because obviously kids are still going to school, so I'm still doing my morning and afternoon school runs, and then obviously
I saw you today.
I did, yes. I saw you today, yes, absolutely. I actually spotted him as well. That's most.
He waved and he flashed his lights.
I did. I flashed my lights and waved at him and everything. And And I don't know if Armando's still there. I don't know if he's got. I don't know what he's up to this week. Oh, there he is. There he is. What are you up to this week, Armando? Recovering, I guess.
Yeah, it's a whole lot of the same. Just kind of sitting home and having my lovely family wait on my every request.
Quite well, absolutely. Quite right too. I can't think of anyone better to be doing. Oh dear, Carlos is playing his violin again. We'll ignore him.
This is just a secret between the four of us. My wife is terrible at taking care of a grown man. She has no sympathy whatsoever. Really, I totally rely on the dogs to cuddle with me.
Come and give you comfort. Yes.
Serve me tea. Yeah.
Excellent. So you're very thirsty and hungry then. Yeah.
But at least we're off air already, and nobody will hear that.
No, it's fine. Nobody's watching. It's fine. That's good. That's good news. Well, there we go. So social media links, if you aren't doing so already, then it's Facebook, Twitter and Instagram. You need to search social media for Plain Talking UK. The WhatsApp number, +44 757 2249166. We are actually having some problems with that at the moment, which I'm trying to get to the bottom of. But do please keep sending them in, because hopefully they'll come through when I get it sorted. +44 757 2249166. Email is podcast@plaintalkinguk.com, and it's www.plaintalkinguk.com if you want to come and have a look at our lovely new shiny website, where you can do things like buy t-shirts and mugs, and then there's some biogs of all the team on there and everybody who works behind the scenes. Why not subscribe to us on our YouTube channel? You'll get notifications when we go live, and you can help shape the conversation of the show by joining us in the chat room. Go to www.youtube.com and search for Plain Talking UK. Why not use our Amazon link as well? That way you can contribute towards the show without having to sort of put your hand in the proverbial pocket. If you buy stuff using our Amazon link, we receive an advertising referral fee, so you can donate to the show without even having to spend an actual penny other than what you were going to spend at Amazon. Or if you do have a couple of coppers lying down the side of the sofa, then why not become a Patreon? Go to patreon.com, patreon.com, and search for Plain Talking UK, and you could become a Patreon of the show and help contribute there. So our guest who we had earlier on, it was the lovely Ryan. His YouTube, if you search YouTube for NT, so that's November Tango Mike Alpha Pilot, search all one word like that, you'll find him on YouTube. Facebook.com/Missionary Bush Pilot. Instagram is @Missionary Bush Pilot. That's bit of a mouthful. And his blog, it's blogs.ethnos360.org/Ryan-Farran, and that's how you can find out more about our wonderful guest we had earlier on in the show. Carlos, time to wrap up quickly.
So big thanks to everyone who's joined us in the YouTube chat room this evening, all the usual family in there. Massive thanks for taking time out of your Fridays. Don't forget as well, a big thanks to everyone who downloads the show as an audio podcast each week. Big thanks to you all as well. And don't forget, if you download through the various links and iTunes and stuff, if you have got 5 minutes, leave us a nice little 5-star rating. We would love that indeed. So from me, Carlos, here in my home P2K studio, from Matt in his master P2K Studios suite, from Nev in the Nev Tech Studios, and from the legendary Armando over in his Charlotte Studios. Take care, everyone. Have a great weekend. Stay safe, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye. As it is, of course, Remembrance Sunday this week. I have a very special piece that Captain Nick, the legend that is Captain Nick, helped me put together. A couple of years ago, you may remember that we put together something about the unknown warrior, which was a very memorable piece. This time round, Captain Nick very kindly tells us all about the In Flanders Field.
John Mccrae was brought up in a strict Scottish Presbyterian family with a brother Tom and sister Gaelish. His father was a soldier, a lieutenant colonel, who brought him up to be a man of principle with strong spiritual values. although he was also described as being warm and sensitive with a great compassion for both people and animals. John Mccrae began writing poetry whilst a student at the Guelph Collegiate Institute. As a young boy, he was also interested in the military. He joined the Highfield Cadet Corps at 14, and at 17 he followed his father into the profession of arms when he enlisted in the militia field battery that his father commanded. He was the very first Guelph student to win a scholarship to the University of Toronto, at which he was awarded a Bachelor of Arts degree in 1894, despite suffering from severe asthma, something that would dog him for his entire life. He went on to attend medical school and spent the summer of his third year as a resident physician at the Garrett Hospital in Mount Airy, outside Baltimore, a summer convalescent home for sick children. He wrote an essay about his young patients and frequently described the children in his correspondence. A kitten has taken up with a poor child dying of muscular atrophy who cannot move. It stays with him all the time and sleeps most of the day in his straw hat. Tonight I saw the kitten curled up under the bedclothes. It seems as it were a gift of Providence that the little creature should attach itself to the child who needs it most. Whilst working towards his degree, he tutored other students to help pay for his studies. 2 of his students are amongst the first women doctors in Ontario. In his spare time, he was also improving his skills as a poet. At university, he had 16 poems and several short stories published in a variety of magazines. He continued to train as a soldier, becoming a gunner, a quartermaster sergeant, and then an officer in 1893. At university, he was a member of the Queen's Own Rifles of Canada and became a company captain. Concluding his studies in 1898, John Mccrae received a Bachelor of Medicine degree and the Gold Medal from the University of Toronto Medical School. He worked as a resident at Toronto General Hospital and then interned at the Johns Hopkins Hospital, where his brother Tom also worked as assistant resident. There, both John and Tom became close associates of Dr. William Osler, the preeminent medical educator of his time. When the South African War started in October 1899, John felt it was his duty to fight. He requested the postponement of his fellowship in pathology that he had been awarded and was commissioned to lead an artillery battery from his hometown, Guelph, becoming part of D Battery, Canadian Field Artillery. He spent a year in South Africa with his unit fighting in the Second Boer War, a conflict that gained little support outside of the Empire and caused argument within the British government itself. When he left South Africa, it was with mixed feelings. He was still convinced of the need to fight for one's country, but shocked by the poor treatment of the sick and injured soldiers. He was promoted eventually to major, but then left the military to pursue a successful medical career. In 1904, he was appointed an associate in medicine at the Royal Victoria Hospital, and later that year he went to England and became a member of the Royal College of Physicians. In 1908, he was appointed physician to the Royal Alexandra Hospital for Infectious Diseases. He was a respected teacher and doctor, and well loved for his enthusiasm and sense of responsibility to his patients. A gregarious man with many friends, he loved taking holidays in Europe and often worked his passage as a ship's surgeon. He was also a spiritual man, attending Sunday morning services regularly at St. Paul's Presbyterian Church in Montreal. His love of poetry continued, and he was a member of the Shakespearean Club and the Pen and Pencil Club, a group of artists, writers and teachers, which included Stephen Laycock amongst its members. However, his life was to change in a dramatic way when on August the 4th, 1914, Britain declared war on Germany. Canada, as a member of the British Empire, also went to war, and its citizens from all across the land responded quickly. Within 3 weeks, 45,000 Canadians had rushed to join up. At 42 years of age, John was older than most of the volunteers, but he was given a post as a medical officer with the 1st Brigade of the Canadian Field Artillery, with the rank of Major. Just before his departure, he wrote to a friend, "It's a terrible state of affairs, and I'm going because I think every bachelor, especially if he has experience of war, ought to go. I'm really rather afraid, but more afraid to stay at home with my conscience." In April 1915, John Mccrae was in the trenches near Ypres, Belgium, in the area traditionally known as Flanders. Some of the heaviest fighting of the First World War took place there during what was known as the Second Battle of Ypres. On the 22nd of April, the Germans used deadly chlorine gas against Allied troops in a desperate attempt to break the stalemate. Despite the debilitating effects of the gas, the Canadian soldiers fought relentlessly and held the line for another 16 days. In the trenches, John Mccrae tended hundreds of wounded soldiers every day. He was surrounded by the dead and the dying. In a letter to his mother, he wrote, "The general impression in my mind is of a nightmare. We have been in the most bitter of fights. For 17 days and 17 nights, none of us have had our clothes off, nor our boots even, except occasionally. In all that time, while I was awake, gunfire and rifle fire never ceased for 60 seconds. And behind it all was the constant background of the sight of the dead, the wounded, the maimed, and a terrible anxiety lest the line should give way." With him he had his horse, Bonfire, a gift from a friend, and he also befriended a dog he named Bono, who accompanied him on his rounds through the medical wards. During this battle, he and his medical staff treated nearly 4,600 wounded men. As the battle drew to a close, he looked back on the past 2.5 weeks spent treating injured men, Canadians, British, French, and Germans in the Ypres salient. John later wrote, "I wish I could embody on paper some of the varied sensations of that 17 days. 17 days of Hades. At the end of the first day, if anyone had told us we had to spend 17 days there, we would have folded our hands and said it could not have been done." It was then, whilst John was in charge of a medical aid post in a dugout cut into the bank of the Isère Canal, that his good friend, 22-year-old Lieutenant Alexis Helmer of Ottawa, was blown apart by enemy artillery fire. The exploding shell left little of his friend's body, but what could be found was gathered together in a blanket and buried in a makeshift grave amongst the wild poppies that were beginning to bloom between the crosses, marking the many dead who lay there. The grave has since been lost, one of the 54,896 soldiers who have no known grave in the battlefields of the Ypres salient. John himself read the funeral service. Unable to help his friend or any of the others who had died, he sat on the footboards of an ambulance wagon and took out his pencil to give them a voice through his poem in Flanders Fields, one of the last he would ever write. Not long after, John was transferred to become the Chief of Medical Services at No. 3 Canadian General Hospital in France. The hospital was housed in huge tents until the cold, wet weather forced a move to the site of the ruined Jesuit College at Boulogne. The hospital had more than 1,500 beds and covered 26 acres. Here the wounded were brought from the Battle of the Somme, the Battle of Vimy Ridge, the Third Battle of Ypres, and from Arras and Passchendaele. John was deeply affected by the fighting and losses, and like many, he became bitter and disillusioned. He felt he should have made greater sacrifices and insisted on living in a tent through the winter like his comrades at the front, rather than in the warm officers' huts. When the cold and damp affected his health, he had to be ordered into warmer surroundings. After the Battle of Ypres, he was never again the optimistic man with the infectious smile. During the summer of 1917, John Mccrae was troubled by severe asthma attacks and occasional bouts of bronchitis. He became very ill, and in January 1918 he was diagnosed with pneumonia. He was moved to No. 14 British General Hospital for Officers, where he continued to grow weak. On the first day that he fell ill again, he learned that he had been appointed consulting physician to the 1st British Army, the first ever Canadian to be so honoured. But on January the 28th, after an illness lasting only 5 days, he died of pneumonia and meningitis. He was buried with full military honours at the Mccrae Cemetery, just north of Boulogne, not far from the fields of Flanders. Bonfire, his horse, led the procession, Mccrae's riding boots reversed in the stirrups. His death was met with great grief from all who knew him. A friend wrote that the day of the funeral was a beautiful spring day. None of us wore overcoats. You know, the haze that comes over the hills at Mccrae. I felt so thankful that the poet of In Flanders Fields was lying out there in the bright sunshine, in the open space he loved so well. Soon after its publication, In Flanders Fields became one of the most popular and admired poems of the First World War, and was translated into many languages. Because of the poem's significance, the poppy was adopted as the flower of remembrance for the war dead of Britain, France, the United States, Canada, and many other countries. The words are now spoken in honor of the fallen by countless people around the world during times of remembrance. In Flanders Fields the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders Fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders Fields.